We are back for another episode of the Info Dump Files. And if you're a regular listener, I'm sure you know that we love to talk to people about what brings them joy and autistic joy and all those things. But something you might not know is that we like to talk about things that are not maybe necessarily commonly talked about, things that people shy away from. And one of those things that me and Becca want to talk more about are sex and sexuality. Um, because for whatever reason, still in 2022, particularly as it relates to the autistic experience, people want to act like us as autistics. We don't have sex. We aren't married. We're not in relationships. Some of us, for some reason, want kids and have kids. I don't know why you do, but power
Totally
to
separate
you.
conversation.
Power to you, if that's something you want in your life. But yeah, I think it's just really frustrating, and there's just such a lack of education out there.
Right. So that's what it is, right? It's like somehow, because we want to talk about autism and sex, there's like some shock value attached to it. Like, sorry to disappoint the planet that we're just human beings and we too have sex or don't have sex, depending on what you want to do, right? And so that's what fascinates me about it, is that somehow in our journey through disability land as a society, we just decided that sexuality was one of those things that just gets chopped. It just disappears. If you have a disability, it just disappears somehow magically, much like we expect that autism just 18, it's just gone, right? In that same magical way, it sort of is dismissed. And what happens is it makes us more vulnerable, right? Because uninformed people are innately are vulnerable, right? But then it also is like it disregards our humanity when we do that, right? It takes away the fact that we can be autistic and human at the same time. And so I really feel like I feel a double-edged sword about this episode, because I feel like, oh, good for us for like pushing the envelope, but also, ew, why are we pushing the envelope? Like, why is this still pushing the envelope? But here it is, and here we sit. And so the more we talk about sex, the more it gets normalized. And I am certainly of a generation of people where it was like halfway, like we kind of talked about it, but like kind of not. And so I'm really excited to see where the fact that these generations coming up are talking about very much, not just about the act of sex and what it generates, but also how that kind of is a part of your identity and how it can create that intersectionality that we talk about, right, all the time. So I'm fascinated to see where it all goes. But I know we're in better shape about sex, I think, than anyone ever has been before. We all talk a lot about the joy of sex now, which wasn't something that got talked about when I was a kid. And so I'm really excited to have our guest on and for us to really open people up to the idea that, you know, if you're autistic, you're also a human, and therefore any of those human constraints apply to you. And you get to explore all the joys and dangers and excitement of sex in all the same ways as anybody else does, right? So yeah, I'm excited to meet Angela and talk to her. I'm excited to get into this conversation, as I think we really are in our own little way, Doug, pushing the envelope, I guess.
I guess so. Unfortunately, like you said, but this particular conversation kind of started with a previous conversation me and Angela had, and we briefly discussed BDSM, and Angela, kind of, really, I think just we needed to get into a deeper conversation about it, because I think it's really important. I don't think people necessarily understand what it is. There's a lot of myths involved. So, Angela, in starting this conversation, I went to Wikipedia and I wanted to see what their definition of BDSM is. And
Of
I
course
wanted
you
to
did.
see, I wanted to see if you agree with it.
Okay.
So their definition is a variety of often erotic practices or role playing involving bondage, discipline, dominance and submission, sadomasochism, and other related interpersonal dynamics.
I mean, that's pretty good, actually. They have that term often erotic in there. And I think that's one of the things that we, as a culture, altogether lack understanding of. People hear BDSM and they think that it means sexual intercourse, that it means orgasm, and that's not the case. It is a whole part of life. It can be a whole part of life that doesn't have to involve sex at all.
Mhm.
So I'm really happy to hear that their definition included that word often.
Yes.
So yeah, way to go, Wikipedia. That was pretty good.
As always, see, Wikipedia introduced me to autism too. So I just feel like, yay, Wikipedia. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, it's good stuff.
And you kind of briefly touched on it. What do you see as some of like the most common myths or the most flagrant myths about BDSM?
I mean, I guess the first thing would be that that it's weird or abnormal. And it's not. It's very normal. It's just that people don't have a true understanding of what it is. We engage in power dynamics in every relationship we have.
Mm.
Dominance and submission is part of every single relationship we have. In BDSM, it's a self-awareness and an
Mm.
awareness of your partner and a negotiation of that relationship that is happening. So the fact that BDSM is considered a counterculture or a lifestyle, that's a little bit erroneous
Mm.
when it really comes down to what is happening inside BDSM. And I think that's where I look at it a lot differently than a lot of people, even people within the BDSM community themselves. I've had a couple people come and say, I don't like how you're talking about this, because it is important to me to almost feel like I have this own independent culture over here. And for you to say that it's normal, for you to say that what we're doing isn't how I've perceived it to be as
Mhm.
part of this group, it hurts me and I don't like it. And that's okay. And I understand that. But I like to look at things with a lot of depth.
Mhm.
And when it comes down to it, it's so much deeper than wearing leather, than getting spanked, than being dominated. It's so much bigger than that. And
Mhm.
that's where this conversation is really important for autistic folks, especially because we tend to be aware of and shamed for our sensory needs.
Mhm.
And BDSM can free us from that. So having these really open conversations and having truly comprehensive sex education can provide us a space of safety within that. I don't think that everybody should be experimenting and learning all about it on their own, like I was when I was young.
Mhm.
Luckily, I have some of the things in place to support me in that learning in a relatively safe way. But not everybody has those things in place to do that. Not everybody has the ability to go to the library and read a whole bunch of different books about it,
Mhm.
and to find a safe person or a couple of safe people to mentor them and to show them and to explain what's safe and what's not safe, what consent is. I would really like that, all of what I just said, to be part of the normal experience that we have as
Mhm.
humans, but it's not. And Becca, you said that it's it's part of the normal human experience, and that we get to experience all that's good and also all that's dangerous. And so this is a bit of a divisive topic, which I am getting ready to
Mhm.
say. Because of our sensory needs, because of a lack of comprehensive sexuality education, we tend to have abusive relationships more often. And it's not because of the current narrative that is out there that is that we are naive and that we don't know. It's because we are in a societal position where we're not allowed to know.
Mhm.
And many autistic individuals, many disabled individuals get into abusive relationships for a variety of reasons. But one thing that I've learned from talking with so many people and from understanding myself and my own relationships is, as bad as it feels really good.
Mhm.
And because it feels really good, that can be misinterpreted as loving.
Mhm.
So this is the first person, this person who I'm in this relationship with, they grab me really hard and they shake me or they hold me down, and they're doing it in a non-consensual way. We didn't negotiate this, we didn't ask about this, but they're doing it. And for the first time, this touch that we're receiving in this way feels really good, and it calms our nervous system like has never happened before. Doesn't that feel like love?
Yeah.
Right? So now we feel safe. Our body is going, oh, you're
Mhm.
safe. Right? And it takes us a while to understand the distance that's happening there of
Mhm.
I'm not actually safe, but whatever's happening to my body is telling me that I'm safe.
Right.
How confusing is that?
It is confusing, and it's you know, I think that this is just one of the ways in which our our brain's profile sort of leads us into this abusive territory, right? In this, for in this instance, it's a sensory seeking, right? Kind of
Yep,
situation.
yep.
And so I think in a lot of ways, our communication differences are also the little window that abusers get in through, right? And little things like that. And so but what I really am so interested to know about, and it's the question that like my brain is like, you have to ask this, just ask this. So like when I am ever exploring someone else's sort of version of the world and that they live in and their identity and all of those things, the first thing that I try to do is to understand, like, for lack of a better word, the appeal of it. Like, what's the appeal? What is it that works for that person in the scenario? Can I understand it for myself? And so immediately when I think about BDSM, I think, man, the fact that there are relationship rules is the coolest thing that I can like verbalized or written down relationship rules, right? Would be beyond appealing to me, right? Just that part of it works for me, right? And so it's this idea that I would love for you to explore more about, that there is more than just the sex to BDSM, right? That there are other components of it that work for people, that appeal to their personalities, right? And their brains and whatever it that is separate from, though it may make the sex better, but is separate from the sex act. And I would love for people to understand a little bit more about that.
Awesome. And that actually is the second part of that abuse piece as well. A lot of abusive relationships, they are rule heavy, right? You know exactly what is going to be to happen to you based on X behavior.
Yeah.
That's a pretty comfortable place to be. And again, that can feel loving because you know what's going to happen. And so that can perpetuate the cycle, which is, again, so important, why we should be having this conversation and why BDSM should be part of the education piece when I talk about comprehensive sexuality education. Because the point of education, right, is to help us stay away from danger, to be informed. So this needs to be part of the conversation to actually further that goal. Now, to your question, absolutely, the rules that are in place, the negotiation that happens with those rules, the self-awareness that is needed, that is nurtured and facilitated in the negotiation and creation of rules, that changes and fluctuates over time, is really phenomenal. And there's this silly narrative out there that autistic people are not self-aware. And that is absolutely the opposite of true. I find that so many of us are hyper aware of ourselves, because we're constantly trying to understand ourselves in this world that tells us that everything we think and feel and believe is not true.
Right.
And so in trying to understand that, we watch people and we look at relationships and we study them. So BDSM then falls right within that framework that says, here's something that you know about yourself, and here is a safe, consensual space for you to communicate that with this other person. You get to tell them how they can talk to you, what kind of words they can use, how much they get to dominate, or how much you want to dominate in a relationship, in what areas of that. Here's another thing. In BDSM, people think that it's just a dominant or a submissive or a switch. It's even more than that. We've got to get away from those binaries, right? It's not one or the other, and it's not sometimes just in between. It's contextual. Every single situation, act, and behavior gets to have negotiation of how that's going to work. So let me just give an example. Let's say you have a person who is very submissive at home with their partner, but at work, they are very dominant, and they're expected to be the one to know, and they have a leadership position, and that's what they have to do at work. They have to negotiate how they are going to have conversations with their partner throughout the day if their partner is contacting them at work. Does their partner, who is the dominant person in their relationship at home, in the domestic setting, do they get to say, I can call you whenever I want to while you're at work and you must answer the phone? That has to be negotiated, right? So again, it's context, and you have to look at it, and it's deep and it's dynamic. You know, we think about all of the different touches that could happen. The same thing is all of the different communications that can happen, all of the different scenarios. And I'm not talking role play scenarios, I'm talking real life scenarios. Because this isn't just about role play. It's not
why
just
isn't
about
that the norm? Like, why is so yeah, like my brain, this is so like I right, like, oh, subversive sex topic, but we're not even talking about like, why aren't our relationships allowed this set of dynamics, right? Like, why is it so just unappealing to the neuromajority that we should talk about the boundaries in our lives, right? And like the things that it's okay to say to me and the things that it's not okay to say to me, or where or how you approach me, right? Those are all of the tools that we teach when we talk about self-advocacy, right?
Yep.
We spin the same language, right? And so I mean, I guess maybe it was introduced, those concepts to the world were introduced through this very sexual venue, but I don't understand how more people don't want that out of their relationships, that they don't want their boundaries respected, that they don't want to be able to sit in a new relationship and set some boundaries, right? In a brand new relationship. I just don't understand that piece. And so to me, it seems like there's more that we could be learning about relationship dynamics from some of these like subculture places, right? Then
Absolutely.
right. And so that's where I'm endlessly fascinated right now. So my brain is like in its own little place right now about that. And I'm going to let Doug ask some well-researched questions now.
Well, Angela, earlier you were talking about digging deeper on things and on topics, and I'm definitely the same way. And so in kind of preparing to talk to you, I thought about so what is there, what's the research out there relating to BDSM looks like? So I started to look for a little bit of research. I found one research study that talked about that BDSM may reduce stress and improve people's moods. Another one that talked about that partnering in healthy BDSM scenes fostered feelings of intimacy between partners. So I imagine you know a little bit more about the research related to BDSM than I do. So kind of what is the research in this area kind of look like at this point?
So it was this that led me down the road to understanding the nervous system, right? It was 30 years ago trying to understand BDSM that led me to wanting to understand the human nervous system and starting to study that, and then ultimately led me into becoming a sexologist to begin with. um, and our bodies, our minds, we tend to think of them as two separate things that work often against one another. But really, they're always working together, because our senses, all 8 of them, not just the 5 that we learn in school, but all 8 of them, they are constantly taking in information from our environment. And that information that's coming in through our senses then gets processed through many, many, many different lenses, and then output happens and we respond. And so with BDSM, I'm going to stay in a safe place here. So from now on, from this point forward, when I'm talking about BDSM, I am talking about consensual, negotiated relationships between partners. This is not a 50 Shades of Grey thing. So get that out of your mind right now. That is bullshit. Get it out of your mind. It's a story and it's fiction. So BDSM is a healthy, natural way to interact with your partner in a consensual, negotiated framework. And that's what I'm talking about here. So when that happens, we have been able to tell our partner, whether it is a sexual partner or not, because it doesn't have to be, we get to tell them, these are the things that help me feel good. And ultimately, the things that help us feel good are the ones that speak to our nervous system in the right way. Getting excited does engage the fight flight response in our nervous system for a very short amount of time. And then we pair that with an activity that engages the parasympathetic nervous system to tell us that we are safe in whatever situation we're in. So this happens when we laugh. When you laugh at something, you get that spike of excitement that comes in, that then when you realize I'm safe and everything's good, what happens at the end of a big laugh for everybody? You take this big ass deep breath, and right? And with BDSM, that same thing happens. You have shared with your partner in a safe space what you need. They are able to provide that for you, whether it is physical or mental or emotional. They're able to provide that for you so that your parasympathetic system can then go, oh. And maybe for the first time that day or that week, you've been able to take that nurturing, deep breath that we're always told that we need to take, but is so hard to find. So that's what that research is talking about when it says that it helps us have less stress, it helps us connect with our partners. It's hard to connect with somebody intimately when you are in fight flight mode and just trying to survive. in order to truly make it that connection, we need to be able to get into that parasympathetic response. And sometimes it is that connection with the partner that allows us to complete the stress response cycle, to fully engage the parasympathetic response. So that's what that's talking about. But I bet you didn't find very much research specific to autistic individuals.
None. Not one research study did I find.
So I have a couple that I can share with you. They're not amazing, but there is somebody who wrote their college thesis on this. I find that it is not super in depth, but it's as in depth as it needed to be for the assignment that they had.
Mm-hmm.
And with the lack of other research out there. Right. So this is, I've had multiple people tell me, why don't you go get your doctorate and write, do your whole thesis and dissertation on this? And I'm like, yeah, I've done enough school. So tired of it,
Right.
of other people telling me how I need to learn. So I'm not sure that I'm going to do that. But I would be very interested in engaging researchers to work with me on this. So if you know any, send them my way. I'd love to share the information that I have, and maybe we could work together, because
that is a very dangerous thing to say in my presence, Doug will tell you. I hope that you meant it, because now it's here and that time is going to come that they will knock on my door and I will send them your way.
I absolutely mean it, because you cannot deny the link between neurodivergence and queer. And those two things are both spaces that have experienced so much lack of education, because people feel like we don't have the right to that. And in both of those, we need to be having this conversation about BDSM, about our nervous systems, about our mind, body, and the response, and how that works for pleasure, and all of that mixed together. And we need some research out there, so that when people tell us that we're wrong and that we shouldn't be having this conversation, we can be like, look here, asshole.
Right, exactly. Yo, but you're 100% right. And so it's like, it's this idea somehow that we should somehow be limited. We shouldn't be given the information that we need to make our life choices. In a lot of areas, not just this one, right? And it's unfortunate, because a lot of the things that I think we're talking about here today, really connect with bigger pieces of our puzzle. Right. It's that idea of that we talk about it endlessly, Doug, the idea of joy and pleasure. Right. And it's the other side of being a highly sensitive person. Right. When you are super sensitive in a sensory way, and something is good to you, it's like super duper good. It's not just good. Right. And we have not been taught how to access that part of ourselves. We've only been taught how to protect and avoid the things that are uncomfortable for us, but we haven't really been sent on a journey of joy. Like, hey, your brain is cool, it does this thing, go try this coolness. Right. The world is figuring out that we love slime and stress objects and all, because they feel good, and that they feel good to them too. Right. It's that same journey to me. And I feel like very much in the journey into the autistic identity, and as we kind of journey into an autistic culture, that this piece where we know very much about this whole queer piece in our puzzle. And I'm certain that as we explore further into more of the like kinks land world, because it's so rule heavy, and that feels good for our brains. And when we're left in a place like in a traditional, I think, way that we approach sex and even sex education isn't through this lens of joy. It's like always through this lens of protect yourself from everything out there, right? And so we have to look for a switch. But I feel like disabled people in general, and autistics for sure, have been cut out of this joy picture.
Oh yeah, oh, huge. And if you want some stuff on that, I can send you some articles on that too, because there are a lot of folks out there having the conversation about crip sex. right? They're like, crip sex, it's beautiful, and look at this, here's some crip porn. And we as a disabled community are taking back something that the world says doesn't belong to us, but it does, because we're human beings. And human beings, although it might be awkward, we know how to have sex.
Right. And like,
Right?
we're not stupid, and we have those bodily functions and needs and all of those requirements.
Right.
But like, take a clue to everybody else, like, how much better is your sex life when you can talk about it with your partner? Like,
Right.
just that, even that shift in the way the majority of the world looks at sex, right?
Yep.
It would be huge to me. It's like, yes, right? Like,
Yeah.
you get to, you don't, it's not just for making babies. It doesn't have to be, right?
Right.
And so there's
Right.
no-
It can be part of overall wellness. Like when you look at the wellness wheel,
right.
where's
Yes.
sex on the awareness wheel? And then people will say, oh, well, you know, it's in the emotional realm or it's in the physical realm. It needs its own.
Mhm.
It needs its own space because people have decided that they can take it away. They have decided that it's such a big thing that there are all of these policies that we spend so much time fighting against, right? So if people think that it's important to spend all this time, effort, and energy on creating all of these policies around sex and sexuality, then it needs its own freaking space on the wellness wheel.
Yes. 1,000,000%.
Period.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I'm sitting here thinking, I know people watching this, they want to hear about the specific sex stuff. They're like, no, I want to actually hear. I want to hear some of the sex things. So I want to share this with you because we're talking about wellness. And let's look at this scenario. You have a couple and you have somebody who is highly masking during the day at work. They come home and they're exhausted. They, for a long time, are struggling with relationships, struggling to be able to maintain a long-term connection with a partner because they can't do both. They can't do success at work and success at home. It's one or the other. But then something happens. They learn about this dynamic. They learn about their needs and they get into a relationship where they can speak their needs. And they tell their partner, I am so big all day, every day in my work life. And I come home and I feel like T-Rex pounding into my space. I can't even walk through the door. I'm so big. And the door seems so narrow, but I want to go in there so bad. But something's keeping me from it. I need help. So their partner knows that they love story, knows that they love imagination, and knows that with their own voice, they can help them transition. So at the end of the day, they get home from work and their partner comes out to the car and they get in the car with them and they start telling them a story. And as they spin this story, this T-Rex transitions from this giant creature into something smaller and smaller and smaller until eventually they're a tiny little bug flying through the forest and they see an opening in a tree and they go into that tree where it's dark and quiet and encompassing them and they feel safe for the first time today.
Mhm.
They take a deep breath and their partner pulls them gently out of that space, that head space, right? Pulls them gently out of it, reaches over and gives them a kiss, just a gentle kiss, and asks them if they're ready. And they get out and they walk into the house together. How freaking beautiful is that?
Yeah.
That's what BDSM is. I don't care what you call it. You don't have to call it BDSM if it makes you uncomfortable, but ultimately that's what it is. that partner came in and they dominated this person and created a space where they could be safe in submission, whatever that looked like for them, where they could be safe as a tiny little vulnerable, easy to squash little creature, but they feel safe with this person. Now they are prepared to have conversations. They're prepared to help each other cook dinner. They're prepared to do the things that have to be done in your house to maintain health. They are able to be intimate in whatever way they choose, whether it's sexually or otherwise, because they now have engaged the parasympathetic nervous system. They've been able to take a break. You know, people talk about meditation like it's God's greatest gift to everybody. What's the freaking difference between what just happened and a meditative state? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Except one is considered bad from a cultural standpoint, and the other is considered enlightened.
It's truth.
And that's why stories are so great, especially when you can tell a great story like that, and how we can learn from that. So before we are done, I don't want to leave this conversation with people learning about beyond this podcast. How can people connect with you to learn more about what you do and how you can help them?
I highly encourage people to connect with me on LinkedIn. It's such a great space where I get to share my things, but also others. And I mean, I met y'all there too. So connect with me on LinkedIn. Just Angela Locashio. My business profile on there is Mama Pistachio. You can also email me at angela@mamapistachio.com. My website is currently in flux right now, so you can go look at it, but it's not going to give you a true picture of what we were just talking about. So I would just contact me directly.
Awesome.
And beyond like talking about sex and sexuality, what are some of the things that you love?
I love a lot of things. I love helping people. Really, truly, I need to be needed. So I tend to put myself in situations where I can do that. And I mean, that's really what I love. I even do it in all of the games that I play. I play D&D every weekend. I've been doing that for, oh my gosh, more than 30 years. Uh, I love that. I love zombie killing and ghost hunting video games. Yeah, I love popcorn.
Butter or no butter? I mean, or
Oh, that's a good question. I was going to ask caramel or no caramel.
Oil and sea salt.
Right.
Is that it for questions, Ted?
Well, we always have yeah. Well, I did have one more question before we get into our final kind of our survey that we always ask.
Okay.
So kind of in hearing you speak and you just talking about D&D and kind of reading a little bit, becoming a little more informed about what BDSM is. I was curious about, do you see any type of connection between D&D and BDSM in terms of kind of the role playing?
Absolutely. Absolutely 100%. I mean, that's now that D&D is, there was recently a study that showed that there were 19 million plus people around the world who play regularly. Yay, that's exciting. We've gone from the time when it was devil worship back when I first started to a time where it is socially accepted, where it is something that is happening in schools and it's a normal, safe space for all kinds of people, not just geeks. but all kinds of people coming together in one place where they never would before. So being able to explore in that safe world opens up curiosity to explore in others.
Makes a lot of sense. Um, we always end each episode with kind of an 11-question survey called Inside the Autistic Studio to get to know our guests a little bit better. So the first question is, what are your pronouns?
She, they.
And what's your preferred stim, Angela?
I like to wiggle, rock, spin, and swing.
And what's your favorite curse word?
Fuck. Every grammatical category it works in. So fuck those fucking fuckers.
And who do you love and what are you doing about it?
Okay. Okay, so you know me, you know I went and I looked at the 11 questions beforehand and I prepared it. So I had to do that. Okay, I love myself, so I ask for help and support when I need it. I love my husband. So when I make decisions, I ask what's best for me, what's best for him, and what's best for our relationship. I love my son. So I honor him as a grown man. That looks like negotiating our relationship so that both of us can be within our zone of consent, regardless of the different age dynamic, right? The traditional power dynamic does not have to happen. And I love my communities. So I advocate from within and without.
And the next two are fill in the blank. You may be neurotypical if.
You may be neurotypical if you have no idea that your behaviors follow a social script.
And you may be autistic if.
You may be autistic if you are keenly aware of how your environment affects your energy and ability to move through the world, and you find the current social narrative that creates most of these environments to be exhausting and unnecessary.
They are very exhausting. What's something you want to learn to do or be better at?
I want to learn, and I'm 45 years old and I haven't mastered this. I struggle to take care of myself physically. Exercising, healthy eating, all of those things are a huge struggle for me. And it is way more than just having willpower.
And what autistic social media account should people be paying attention to?
This one right here, both of your personal accounts as well. I love me some Jeremy Andrew Davis. Also, autistic science person on Twitter. So that's at @sci person. Dr. Sarai Pala is another one. Morgan Harper Nichols, Amelia Nagoski and Emily Nagoski, Philip King Lowe at Today's Autistic Moment. I've started listening to recently. And Autistic and Living the Dream at social_parasite on Twitter.
What's one thing in your routine you couldn't possibly live without?
Support.
Dog, cat, or must I choose?
So both of them cause me sensory difficulties. I love them both dearly. But I lost my girl earlier this year. We do have one other dog, but I never again, I can't with the cleanup and the care and the noises and the smells. It's not worth the energy that it takes. And so cats all the way, baby. Come and sit on my lap and be as heavy as you can.
Purr, damn it.
Right, exactly.
And the last question, what does autistic joy mean to you?
This means the ability to be myself and feel completely safe, comfortable, accepted, and unconditionally loved in my environment.
I love it. That's it, right? That's the last one.
That's it.
My goodness. What a good episode. I could have this conversation forever. Like we could go out to drinks and just have this conversation because
It would
I
be
am
a long
fascinated.
night.
Right? I'm
This is
so
just the
other people will be
appetizer.
listening in and the whole thing, but really great conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you for
And
having
so
me.
I will definitely be reaching out to stay in touch. Thank
Awesome.
you so much for your time and your spoons and everything. Another episode in the can, and we'll see you guys for the next one.